Imagine this. 500 years ago, three children are led on a journey high up into the Andes Mountains for some kind of sacred purpose. And then, poof, they just vanish from history.
Yeah, completely lost to the world. But here's the crazy part. They were perfectly preserved, frozen in a silent, icy tomb. Their story was just waiting for someone to finally find them and piece it all together.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to dive right in because what these children revealed, without ever speaking a single word, mind you, would end up challenging pretty much everything we thought we knew about a lost empire.
So, to get to the bottom of this, our story actually begins not 500 years ago, but much more recently. It starts with a discovery that was, honestly, part archaeology and part straight-up miracle.
So, picture this. It's 1999, high up on this massive volcano in Argentina, Mount Lulayaco. The ice is starting to melt back just a little. And an archaeologist, Johann Reinhardt, and his team, well, they stumble upon something that just shouldn't have been possible. They find the perfectly preserved bodies of three Inca children. And this is where it gets absolutely breathtaking. When I say preserved, I don't just mean bones. I mean their skin was totally intact. Their hair was still in braids. Their clothes were still vibrant. You could even see their facial expressions, literally frozen in their final moments. So let's actually meet them. First, there's La Doncella, or the maiden. She was about 15, and her face was just serene. Then you have the boy, who was around 7 years old, and he showed clear signs of stress. And finally, the lightning girl, a 6-year-old who got her name because, get this, her body was struck by lightning long after she was buried in the ice. Okay, so the big question is, why were they there? To understand that, we have to understand the world they came from. So let's take a trip back in time, 500 years, to the incredible Inca Empire. I mean, the Inca built one of the most powerful civilizations in history. It stretched for thousands of miles. And what's truly mind-boggling is how they managed it all. Think about this. No wheels, no iron tools, and no written language. It's wild. This was the world these kids were born into, a world run by a strict social order and a really deep reverence for their sun god, Inti. And here's a point that is absolutely crucial to this whole story. For the Inca, mountains weren't just landscapes. They weren't just rock and ice. They were living, breathing gods called apus. These were powerful deities who controlled everything, the weather, the crops, you name it. And keeping them happy? Well, that was a matter of survival. Which, of course, brings us right back to why these children were on that mountain. They were part of a sacred ritual, a ceremony that, honestly, we've misunderstood for centuries. It was called the Capacocha. Now, this wasn't something they did every week, no. This ritual was reserved for the most important and often the most dire moments in the empire. We're talking about a crippling drought, a terrible famine, or maybe the death of the emperor himself. And why children? Well, in their belief system, children were seen as pure, which made them the most worthy messengers to send to the gods, the apus. And you really have to wrap your head around this next part, because it changes everything. From the Inca point of view, this was not some cruel punishment. It was the absolute highest honor. The families of these children were elevated in society, and the children themselves, they were believed to become divine, joining the gods as eternal protectors of their people. So whatever you're imagining, it probably wasn't a rushed, violent act. Not at all. Their final journey was a long, deliberate, and deeply sacred pilgrimage. I mean, just try to imagine it. These kids walked for weeks, sometimes months, in huge processions that snaked across the entire empire. They were treated like royalty, dressed in the absolute finest clothes, covered in precious artifacts. And then came the final leg of the journey, climbing over 22,000 feet into the sky, into a world with almost no oxygen, just thin, freezing air, and a cold that could kill you. And for 500 years, that's where their story ended, on top of that frozen peak. But now, let's jump back to our time. Because those whispers they left behind in the ice, well, thanks to modern science, we were finally ready to hear them. So scientists brought out the whole high-tech toolkit to listen to what these kids had to say. CT scans showed they were in perfect health right before they died. DNA analysis helped trace their family lines. But the most amazing story of all, it came from something as simple as a single strand of hair. Okay, this is so cool. Hair acts like a biological timeline, like a little recorder of what you've been eating.
Months before the ritual, their hair shows they ate a simple peasant diet, mostly potatoes and veggies. But in their final weeks, whoa, that diet changes completely. It shifts to elite foods like maize and llama meat. They were being prepared, their status was being elevated, and in their very last moments, they were given coca leaves and an alcoholic drink, not as poison, but as a final act of care. It was to ease their fear, to numb them to the intense cold, and to help them drift into one last peaceful sleep.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Why does all this matter? Well, because this discovery didn't just add a little footnote to a history book. It basically forced us to rewrite the entire chapter on the Inca. See, before this, almost everything we knew about rituals like Capacocha came from the Spanish conquistadors. And let's be honest, their accounts were often biased, sometimes just plain wrong, or even propaganda. We were basically guessing. But these children, their bodies took us from speculation to hard scientific fact. For the first time, we had the intimate human details of how this incredibly sacred ritual was really carried out. So in the end, these children did so much more than just confirm a ritual. They put a human face on an entire civilization. They revealed a belief system that was way more complex, profound, and deeply human than we ever gave them credit for. And, of course, their discovery forces us to ask some really important and tough questions today, right? Like, how do we treat, display, and respect the remains of the ancient dead? It's incredible when you think about it. These 3 children, silent for 500 years, ended up becoming some of the most powerful messengers in history. It's almost like they waited for us to be ready to listen. Not to a story about victims, but to a much deeper story, one of faith, of honor, and of a lost world's secret connection to its God.